Welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Conversations at Home program. I'm Raphael Bob-Waksberg. Before we are joined by our guest today, I want to let you know that the SAG-AFTRA Foundation is a nonprofit organization that relies entirely on donations to provide emergency assistance and free educational programs to SAG-AFTRA artists. This conversation is made possible thanks to the generosity of our supporters. Over the past year, the foundation has given over $7 million in COVID relief to more than 7,500 performers. If you are a SAG-AFTRA artist and need help, please ask. And if you can help, please give. Information can be found at the description of this video. Somewhere in the description is where the information is. Thank you for your support. Now, without further ado, that was plenty of ado, and now there will be no further ado. This is going to be an ado-free conversation.
Thank God, I'm so sick of ado.
Zero ado will be, there's be no more ado.
Been dealing with ado all day.
I've not been introduced yet, so you should not be speaking. You're puncturing the fiction of how what it means to introduce a guest. Like a vampire, you cannot enter until you have been welcomed. But enough of that. That was more ado. I lied. Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce the creator of the G word, Adam Conover. Welcome.
Hello. Hello. Thank you so much for having me, Raphael. And what an incredible foundation the SAG-AFTRA Foundation is. Based on that description, I can't wait to donate myself.
I hope you will donate yourself. All right, so before we begin, just for context for the viewer, I'm wondering if you could describe our relationship in 3 words or less.
Sure. We were roommates
from... Great. That was 3 words, or not the 3 words I would have chosen. I would have picked my words a little more carefully, but that's what you chose.
We were roommates.
Okay. All right.
3 words.
Well, you said sure first. That was that, but it's okay. We were roommates, and now we are interlocutors. Adam, your new show, The G Word, is now streaming on Netflix. Do we ever learn what the G word is, or is it meant to be open to interpretation?
It's kind of like Lost, you know, like we started out thinking we might eventually figure out what it is. And then we just sort of got distracted along the way. You know, you got to make 26 episodes a year and you get caught up in other mysteries. And then, you know, at the end, we just sort of went abstract rather than solving anything because it was a lot easier to do it. No, the G word stands for government. It's a comedy show. Yeah, it's a comedy show with the United States government. And the idea, you know, the G word is that this is something we don't want to talk about. We're not comfortable talking about the government in the United States often. We talk about politics. We talk about, you know, we argue about politics, but the government itself is something that people often don't want to discuss.
And you discussed it.
And we discussed it. Yeah, we discussed it in disgusting detail.
And you were both disgusted with it, and you discussed it.
Yeah, I was disgusted by the discussion. But no, it's not disgusting at all. It's a wonderful discussion.
It's partially disgusting. I've seen it. There's some disgusting
that's true.
elements.
Yeah.
I think what the show is so good at is it delves into, I think for a lot of people, what they may not know about the government. And some of those details are pretty gruesome and not great. And others are actually kind of wonderful. And like, oh, I didn't know the government did that. Do you have a favorite discovery that you maybe didn't know, like actual you did not know when you pitched the show, and then through the making of the show you discovered?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of the things I knew going in, for instance, that we wanted to do a segment on the National Weather Service and how the, you know, Air Force's hurricane hunters fly planes through hurricanes in order to understand where hurricanes are going to protect us from their deadly force. But like one thing that I wasn't aware of, and, you know, I just asked my staff to, hey, bring in what the government does that is the most, powerful and shocking. And if we're shocked by it in the room, then it's probably a pretty good topic for us. And one of the ones they brought in was that the government invented and still manages the entire GPS system that the entire world uses today. That every time you pull out your phone is receiving a signal from government GPS satellites that are run by what was formerly the Air Force, now it's the Space Force. And those are used no matter where you go on the globe. You go to Denmark, you go to China, you're using those U.S. government satellites. And it took 50 years of government research to design them. And I literally had no idea. And I was like, well, why is that not a story we tell?
Yeah, I was also really surprised to see that on your show. I thought that was really interesting. So this is for SAG-AFTRA and the SAG-AFTRA Foundation.
The show is union. The show is union. Okay, we didn't do it non-union. I swear to God, it's legit. Okay, don't pick at my house. It is a union show.
And you actually, so this show is produced with Barack Obama's company, Higher Ground, and Barack Obama is actually on the show with you doing scenes. Did you ever consider maybe a struggling SAG-AFTRA performer for that role, or you thought, let's give this guy a couple bucks?
Yeah, no, I know. Well, look, people don't know this. Barack Obama is a working actor, okay? He has to do self-tapes like everybody else, right? He has to schlep his way to Burbank. He was like, hello, I am Barack Obama. I am 5'11", and I am reading for the role of Barack Obama.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he really shat the bed, but we thought his look was good. So we brought him in anyway.
Yeah, sometimes it's just about how tall are you.
Yeah, exactly. It's about having a body to fit the costume we've already bought.
Right, and he did, and so he got the role. What was that like shooting scenes with him?
I mean, he is infuriatingly gifted as a comedic performer. I mean, you and I spent the early years of our lives of his presidency, working away for free in basements in New York City trying to get good at doing comedy, right?
Yeah.
While this guy was busy running the free world. And then at the end of it, he turns out to be as funny or funnier than me, like in a performance situation. That made me professional.
Put our 10,000 hours in, and he just has it.
This guy just waltzes in and does it. No, he gets it very quickly. The funny thing though was that when I'm working on my own show, I tend to direct the actors a little bit. It's just like how I like to work. Like, hey, can we get one like this just for the comedy wise of it? Yeah. And so there was a moment at which I was like, oh, that was great. Could we get the next one a little bit faster? And he was like, oh yeah, sure. You want a little faster? Yeah, I can do that. But it was like, it was a little bit of an out-of-body experience, being like, all right, I just gave notes to the former president of the United States, and he took them. I was like, no, this one a little angrier at me. Be a little bit more pissed off. He was like, I can do that. Yeah.
Keep giving me notes, and I can get there.
Yeah. Oh, you want me to be annoyed at you? Yeah, I can do that.
So because SAG-AFTRA is a guild for actors. Famously, but it also represents hosts and presenters, newscasters.
Radio broadcasters.
I wanted to ask you, do you think of yourself as an actor, or are you more of a host, presenter, newscaster, thing of that nature?
I mean, it's funny because almost all of my acting has been as myself, but on Adam Ruins Everything, I was playing a heightened version of myself on my old show. And so that was a character who we developed, and I was doing, comedic acting because I was, acting as this heightened version of myself. On the G Word, I'm basically always myself. I'm much closer to a talk show host. I'm just like, hey, here are my thoughts. I'm sharing them with you. This is what I'm interested in. This is what I'm curious about. This is a joke about my own experience. So I wouldn't say I was quite acting on that show, except that I'm hitting my marks. I've got blocking.
You're conveying emotion.
I mean, what I try to do is honestly, actually, I'm really happy you asked me about this because it lets me talk about this a little bit. I do feel that I do something that not a lot of other performers do, which is that I am a comedian and I'm talking right to camera as we've seen comedians do that, any late night show host, John Oliver, people like that. But the way I do it, I am also simultaneously acting my own reaction. So there are a couple moments where, for instance, I'm talking about the government's failure to help people in Puerto Rico, or its failure to protect us from COVID-19, and finding my own sense of anger about that, like that made the anger that made me initially write it, and that fueled the entire segment. But right now I have to summon that anger and make it palpable on screen. Actually did feel like acting. And there were a few times when my director, John Wolfe, came to me and said, he reminded me, when I was talking about COVID-19, he was like, hey, remember that a friend of ours, parent died, because of COVID-19. Like that's what's fueling you right now. And I'm like, thank you. That's perfect. That's an acting note that he gave me, Right. And so that's something that in the format of informational comedy that I do, that I feel that no one else is quite doing that hybrid in that same way. And it's something that I'm very proud of on the show.
Yeah. I was curious, you answered it a little bit, but I was curious about what is your process as a performer? Because I imagine it would be somewhat different than other people. Like you walk onto set, you get a script. Obviously, you're familiar with the script already. You crafted it, you wrote it, you did the research. It was written to your voice. You had plenty of opportunities to give notes, but still, on that day on set, what kind of questions, what kind of exercises are you going through? Or did you just okay, here's the copy, let me take my stab at it? Or are there things that you're thinking about to get in character?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you sort of never know how it's going to sound until you finally say it on set on the day. And so you always realize that, oh, wait, this isn't quite right. I want to make a little tweak here. That's always been part of the process. That's why, for instance, Adam Ruins Everything, we always had a writer on set to help me work out those moments when I wanted to make a little tweak, but wanted to make sure we didn't violate our fact checking. So there's always that piece of it. It has to feel authentically like it's coming out of my mouth. I mean, obviously it is coming out of my mouth, but it has to feel like it's authentic to my own voice. And so I always make some adjustments to the lines there. The other thing that people always want to know about is that I speak in these long blocks of text on the show, and I almost never have the luxury of working with prompter because we just have never been able to afford it. Prompter is very expensive, both to add to the camera and to have the prompter operator. And so I have a really weird process of memorization where I just sort of when I know what the next shot is, I just start I never pre-rehearse the night before because I don't have time, because we normally shoot 9 pages a day. Wow. And it's almost all me talking. And so I mostly just look at the script page right before we shoot and do the rehearsal, and then just try to get off book during the rehearsal. And then usually I'm off book fully by take 2. But when the camera's still being worked out and stuff like that. And so it's each line is its own little individual project of me committing it to memory and then doing it front to back, and then also finding the moments within it where I'm bearing down, where I'm doing a little turn in my delivery, where I'm, hitting the joke, how I'm working with camera when I'm zipping, and then we finish it, and then I completely forget the line for the rest of my life. But I've got this weird memorization ability I have to use.
I think that's really helpful, actually, because I think that is a good that the act of memorization is a way to internalize the line. And I think that a lot of actors who maybe don't have to memorize as much, or maybe better at memorizing, don't get that opportunity to actually go through the words over and over and over again, and let that experience how you say them and and feel them and what it means as you're saying them. Yeah. If you are reading off cue cards, that's a very different talent. I mean, you have to work much faster to.
I mean, prompter is really interesting to work off of. I like working off a prompter when I do, but it's an autopilot experience. It's you just read it and you sort of learn how you might want to emphasize as you go, and you're sort of letting the prompter lead you, and you end up zoning out. And I sort of don't really get to do that. I have to sort of commit it to memory and understand it. But it's also I think actors have the experience of doing this when they rehearse beforehand, and which ideally they're doing like days beforehand. They're not having to do it on set. If they have the opportunity to, not everybody does,
Yeah.
but that's when they're trying it out. For me, because I'm often like it's a scene between me and the camera. That's the interesting thing. I always introduce myself to the Steadicam operator we work with and like get to know them because we're like dance partners. Like I'm working with them really directly, and I'm trying to like literally look through the camera at the people at home and have a one-sided conversation with them. A little bit similar to what you do with stand-up when you're having a one-sided conversation with the audience. And so to me, it's sort of, that is the rehearsal right beforehand, where I'm like trying out my different methods of saying it or whatever. But yeah, it is an interesting process, and it's one that I just sort of developed myself while doing Adam Ruins Everything out of necessity, because we were just shooting so many pages a day and I had to like figure out a way to do it.
You mentioned stand-up. I'm wondering if you could talk a little more about the ways in which your experience in stand-up has affected your acting process and vice versa, or your performance style, or what you've brought back and forth between those two arts.
Yeah, I mean, so my background is basically sketch comedy plus stand up. I mean, we were in a sketch comedy group together many years ago, and so that kind of writing, that sort of fast visual writing, is like one half of my TV process. The other half is all stand up, is me talking directly to camera, and the magic trick of stand up is learning how to be your natural funny self in a completely unnatural environment. It's very unnatural to be standing on a raised stage in front of 50, to a couple hundred other people and having a one-sided conversation with them. But you need it to feel as natural as it feels when you're just at a party talking to your friends in the corner, all of you holding red Solo cups in your hands, and you're just like being loose and naturally funny. And almost everyone has had the experience of being naturally funny in that environment, I think. Even the unfunniest person in the world has made their friends laugh and has told a funny story, right? And so the difficult part of stand-up is figuring out how to bring that same energy to the stage, and not clenching up, not feeling stiff, but just like, hey, I'm just here talking to you guys, making you laugh. And then how to do that while doing basically the same set over and over again and finding the life in it every night. And I think that gave me good preparation for doing that on shows like Adam Ruins Everything and the G Word, where, I'm trying to feel like really natural, like I'm just, hey, hanging out in the room with you. But in fact, I am reading lines that I wrote over the course of 2 years, but we were delayed because of COVID. So we ended up taking 2 years to write the whole show. And I labored over these lines. They were fact checked. I got notes on them. I adjusted them. Like, we went through this whole process. But when I'm doing them, on camera, now it all comes down to this moment. I just need to feel like, hey, Adam's just talking to you right now about his experience. And sometimes I'm getting really personal. I'm like, when I was growing up, my mom used to say this or that to me, or, this makes me so angry. I need to feel those emotions, and I needed to just feel real. And I think stand-up was a really important preparation for that. Now, the interesting thing is when I go back to stand-up, there have been times when I've done stand-up and I've made it feel too television-like and too Adam Ruins Everything-like, where I try to make it too informational, and stand-up is still its own beast, where I'm like needing to relearn how to be as loose as I want to be and as personal and intimate with the audience as I want to be. There's still a distance in television that there isn't in live performance. And that's something that I've been experimenting and learning a lot about now that I've been able to do stand-up again after the pandemic, and I'm working on a new hour that I'm taking on the road. That's like my experience now, is trying to figure out, okay, how do I get really down to a state of intimacy with the crowd?
I was thinking about, in your show, because it is kind of, both your shows are somewhat sketch based, or they come from the world of sketch, and there is a largeness to the comedy, often not necessarily in your performance, but some of the other actors you bring on, they're kind of playing sketch characters. They're very, very big, very broad. And I think that, a lot of actors, when they first learn how to act for the camera, kind of the lesson is to be very small and be very subtle, and to bring it down. And I think in sketch comedy, and also in voice acting and animation, which you've done a fair amount of, mostly with me, you do want to find a bigger, broader register.
Oh yeah.
but there is a difference between good big and bad big. And I wonder if part of it is about finding that truth that you're talking about, of finding that kind of like intimacy in the largeness. Or I wonder if you can speak a little bit about what that means to be broad in a helpful way versus broad in a way that like feels cheesy, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, you're right. We go maximum broad a lot of the time. And I actually borrow something from you that you used to say about BoJack, where you would say that, the more serious the show can get on the one hand, the more silly it can get on the other hand. And I've always borrowed that ever since I heard you say it, talk about my work, that we do very serious informational comedy. And as a result, we need to get very silly in the comedy, in the comedy half of it. So, we're going to do jokes. We're gonna, Teddy Roosevelt comes on screen. He's gonna shoot a gun at the ceiling and like have, ceiling tiles fall behind him and make jokes about shooting elephants. Like that's the style of comedy we're doing. In terms of the broadness of the performance, like I think the important thing for me is when actors understand the nature of the assignment in terms of delivering the punchline. Like very often in our shows, the sketch actors are literally delivering just the punchline. Like I'm setting something up in my language and they are hitting the punch at the end. And so sometimes it needs to be like really loud and really big and really, like a smack. Like, this, a lot of times a punchline just needs a sound like this. It needs a bang. Someone needs to fall and hit the ground. Somebody needs to get hit in the face, or the line, the delivery of the line needs to have the feeling of a smack at the end. Called the
telling the audience, laugh now.
Yeah, exactly. It's called a punchline for a reason. You need this sort of moment. And so having, it's incredibly important when actors like understand that. And, when the read is too small, they might not do it. It might not get us there. Now, it's true that you can also go too much in the other direction, but on our work, I always, want people to tend towards being kind of big, because I think it is helpful for that. Now, one of the really cool things about this show, The G Word, is that we did it with a set cast. Adam Ruins Everything, we cast sort of Law and Order style. I sort of make the joke that like everyone who worked at UCB during those years got to do one line on Adam Ruins Everything. And that was really, really fun. But for this show, we decided instead to take a small cast approach where we had, 5, 6 actors or so playing every single role. And we had some really incredible folks. We had James Austin Johnson on and, all these, Sierra Katao and all these amazing people. And that was really cool because they really got to understand the entire script. They read all the scripts for the entire show, which like previously day players would maybe only get 2 pages, right? And so they understood everything and they understood the context of what the scene was and what they needed to deliver. Are they delivering information? Is this a serious scene? Is it, et cetera, et cetera. So like Nicole, who played our district attorney in episode 6, like does this wonderful parody of like a Law and Order style district attorney. And it's like, it's like a very reserved performance, but she pushes it at just the right moments. One of my other favorite things, by the way, let me just say, is that we also, and this wasn't even planned. It was just sort of part of the exigencies of the production. But we also had a small cast of background actors. Rather than having different background every day, we had the same stable of like 10 people. Wow. And that was awesome because the background actors were bought in too. And so we have a couple moments where we have some basically jokes, but they're nonverbal because they're background actors who, are not allowed by virtue of their contract to speak. Like getting laughs because they had, they were part of the show and they had more investment put in them. So there's this guy, David, who has a couple moments on the show. He's the guy who is working in the DARPA office and he's mentally controlling bees, but then the bees like go haywire and start attacking him. And he's so funny in this. He's like, mugging in this really funny way as he's being attacked by bees. He really sells the hell out of it. And if we had just, been, randomly grabbing background actors as so many shows do, you wouldn't get that kind of performance. But instead we were able to invest in people and have people there for the entire 3 weeks we were shooting.
So what I'm hearing is the real heroes of this show are the non-SAG-AFTRA members.
No, background actors are SAG-AFTRA members.
Are they? I didn't know that.
You didn't know this? No, it's a very important part of SAG-AFTRA. Absolutely.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
All right, very interesting,
and an important job worthy of respect and fair pay, in my view.
Absolutely, clearly. I'm wondering if you talk a little bit about the art of playing Adam Conover, or the decision. I guess when you started Adam Ruins Everything, was there any conversation of like maybe this guy should be like Adam Cattaraugus or something? Like, why does he have to be like me? Or was it always like, no, of course I am Adam Conover and I am playing myself, and any jokes we want to make are going to be made about me, Adam Conover, and people are going to think that's what I'm like. If it's good enough for Will Smith, it's good enough for me.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that's what I wanted to do at the beginning.
Yeah.
And part of it was because, when we did the initial Adam Ruins Everythings on College Humor, I just started saying at the end, hi, I'm Adam Conover and this is Adam Ruins Everything, because I wanted people to like know it was me and know my name. But then I also wanted to make fun of myself, because I wrote a thing where I was, I was the character who was the butt of every joke, because I'm telling everybody the thing and they don't want to know it. And I had this idea in my head even before making the show that was sort of one of my favorite kinds of comedy to do. I remember watching like Curb Your Enthusiasm, and my favorite jokes in Curb Your Enthusiasm were the ones where Larry David is just making fun of himself. Frankly, I'm not even the biggest fan of Curb. I like it, but my favorite scene in it was one where it's very simple. It's Larry David goes to the beach and he's like at the beach and he's like wearing a hat and sunglasses. He's like wearing full clothes and he's just like puts out a towel and he's like, I don't know what people see in this. Like he's just not like, what's with the beach, right? And this is just a joke making fun of himself, right? For being this particularly joyless, uncomfortable guy. And I was like, that is one of my favorite kinds of comedy, is like picking apart your own flaws. Another great example of that is one of my favorite shows of all time is the Larry Sanders Show. Larry Sanders is Gary Shandling. He could almost be called Gary Shandling. All of Larry Sanders' neuroses are Gary Shandling's neuroses, and hang-ups about being a TV.
He also has his other show. It's Gary Shandling's show, which is
right.
More, if there's any doubt of who this character is, like, there's a through line there. It's the same guy.
Yeah, and he says, I'm Gary Shandling on the show. There's also a kinship of this where, every talk show host creates a character version of themselves that they make fun of. Conan O'Brien, I'm so pale, I'm so nerdy, and he's always hitting on the guests and stuff like that. There's a tradition there. And so it just turned out to be, the most productive kind of comedy to do. But yes, it is. It did eventually become annoying to me that there are people on the internet who are like, I hate that Adam Conover. He's so smug and annoying when he tells people all this information that they don't want to hear. He's like the ultimate actually guy. And I'm like, yeah, that's the fucking joke. That's like saying, I don't like The Office. That Michael Scott character is such a awkward racist. Like, yeah, that's the joke of the. So that's fine. You have to accept as a comedian that some portion of the public will not get the joke and just think you're being serious. 100%.
Jerry Seinfeld should lock his door. It's dangerous. Doesn't he know that
what's going on?
He's going to pop in, and if he doesn't, just keep it locked.
So I'm happy to, I felt a bit of freedom though when I put down the Adam Ruins Everything version of myself, and I was like, now it's me more directly. I'm still a person I can make fun of, but it's it's not a character version of myself that's heightened. It's me.
Are you, as a performer, are you interested in playing other roles, or do you feel like I really want to keep exploring this character and see where it takes me?
I'd love to play other roles. It's not something that I've actively pursued because, I'm not, the life of an actor is a hard one, and I am a comedian, and I'm happy to be a comedian and go for comedian type roles. And it's a little bit of, a cheat that I do occasionally audition for acting roles, and I'm always happy to do so. But you can kind of go in with a little bit of like confidence when you're a comedian, because you're like, hey, I'm a comic. Here I am. People think I'm funny. Am I right for this or not? I'm not trying to.
You tell me. I'm not.
Yeah.
Convince you of anything.
Yeah. I feel lucky to be able to take that attitude towards it. And I empathize with, actors who I think have one of the hardest jobs in Hollywood, just trying to be a working actor. But I would, I'd love to do more acting and performance. I love the craft of it. I also, on the other hand, though, I love the craft of simply hosting television. Like I had the opportunity a couple years ago to host a kids game show on Nickelodeon called The Crystal Maze. And that was like, that was all showing up, hitting the mark, reading the prompter with a lot of energy, keeping it moving, interacting with the contestants and having fun with them. And, I had the time of my life doing that. And it was a lot less fraught than, trying to tell the truth about, America's messed up criminal justice system and all the other things that I do. So, that's really one of my real loves too.
Great. So finally, before we wrap things up here, I just want to one more topic because this is SAG-AFTRA Foundation, and you happen to be a board member of the WGA.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk a little bit about guilds and unions for artists, because I think a lot of SAG-AFTRA members, and I include myself, maybe don't always think a lot about what it means to be in a union or a guild. And what that should mean for us or to us. I think for a lot of people, we join because we got a gig, and to get a gig, when you get the gig, you have to join, and now you're a member. And we think of like, oh, that's like, it's a status thing. Like, I'm a member now. I'm a real actor. That's very exciting. But I don't know if we always think about ourselves like vis-a-vis this larger collection of individuals. So I'm curious if you have anything you'd like to share about that.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I think we need to count ourselves lucky to be members of one of the only heavily unionized industries left in the United States. The union density has plummeted in the U.S. And the fact of the matter is, if it weren't for the unions that you and I are lucky enough to be a member of, we'd be making half of what we are. We wouldn't have health care. I mean, go talk to anybody who works in reality. Go talk to anybody who works in video games, to take two other big industries that are not unionized, or at least to the extent that they should be. And you'll see, it's really hard right now for actors. It's really hard for writers. It's a lot harder if you don't have the union coverage. That's true for a very simple reason, which is that when you are acting as a single person, you can only negotiate so much with the company, right? You could say, I want this, that, or that. But unless you're Tom Cruise and you have all the leverage in the world, you're only going to get so far, But if you can negotiate together with tens of thousands of other people who say, this is what we're going to have, or we're all going to walk, which is going on strike, then you can get a lot more. And it's only because the union members of the past took that risk upon themselves and took those strike votes, or, exercised that collective power, that SAG-AFTRA members and Writers Guild members have health insurance, have pensions, and have, the pretty healthy minimums that we do today. Now, a lot of that, though, is because of a lot of those benefits that we have is because the people of the past used their collective action. There's been a lot of reticence to use our collective power in the present. A lot of, the unions, and the Writers Guild has been guilty of this at times as well, have not been willing to use that collective power in order to fight for their members to the degree that they have in the past, or et cetera. And as a result, you've started to see like wages and benefits erode because we've, taken, a friendly attitude. Let's just get the contract done and not cause too much of a fuss. What'd you say?
Let's get our members back to
our members back to work, kind of thing. And there's a lot of reasons, a lot of good reasons to take that kind of approach. But what ends up happening is when the companies say, well, hey, let's roll back your healthcare plan. Let's have a really, really low minimum for new media work, stuff like that. You can't win those battles unless you actually harness the member power, activate the members, and have the members say, hold on a second, are we willing to work under these conditions, and organize? But when we do that, when we do organize in that way, we are really really able to win huge gains. We're able to win coverage of the internet like the Writers Guild did in 2007, or the sort of like really broad protections that SAG-AFTRA has won over the years. The thing that I think I always try to bring to light to people is that we really have a huge amount of power when we work together, and we need to be willing to use it. That's my message, and I hope we can keep doing that in this town in order to build a better life for ourselves and our fellow artists.
That's great. On that note, on behalf of the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, I want to thank you for sharing your experiences, process, and craft with your fellow performers. Thank you, Adam.
Raphael, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation. And thank you to all the SAG-AFTRA members watching.